Which news source do you trust? I trust no news sources. I read all news sources. There's not a single news source that I trust 100% unconditionally. I guess maybe like Democracy Now, I would say. But that's because, again, Democracy Now is also biased as well. It's just biased in my direction. Overall, though, as far as like news sources goes, when I say I trust no news source 100%, that doesn't mean that like I'm not going to take seriously their coverage. We look at every single news source on this broadcast. We look at right-wing sources, we look at left-wing sources, we look at supposedly unbiased news sources as well. I think reporting is incredibly important. I will forever hold it to a incredibly high standard. It is an absolute necessity. It must exist. It must continue. What I do is nothing. I'm just a fucking armchair quarterback. I'm just a fucking dumbass. These guys are actually out there, you know, doing real reporting, doing real journalism, and it's very important. Associated Press, New York Times, CNN. There's wonderful journalists who are my friends, who I love, who I appreciate their analysis. You know, and they are doing a very, very important job. Now, having said that, I would not ever say that the entirety of the New York Times is great. Of course, their op-ed section is full of genocidal monsters and those who would rather see the poor be melted into biomatter, or want to personally create a structure where trans people are just like slowly but surely cut out of society, Western society. But overall, I think that, you know, the reporting side is important. You just have to know what neoliberal media's biases are. I finally understand why people like Ben Shapiro are so angry. They're angry that like 200 years ago, what Israel does would be considered just normal imperialism and colonialism. But today it's considered genocide, and they're angry they were too late to the party and the world doesn't just turn a blind eye. Yes and no. I think Ben Shapiro loves genocide in general. Like, anyone else you say that about, maybe I understand. If you're talking about like an Israeli liberal, for example, an Israeli liberal will get mad at it under similar terms. Ben Shapiro is far beyond an Israeli liberal. You know what I mean? Ben is a psychopath. He's a bloodthirsty monster. You have to know what neoliberal biases are and have your own from the left. It's media literacy. Read the news and understand what their perspective is and why they'd advocate for a particular issue. Yes. Was the interview with Peterson yesterday interesting? No, it wasn't. It was actually really fucking shitty. Ben is just like a straight up racist. And I think he just is in it for the straight up racism, right? Like there's not a bad position he won't jump on. I've actually... Now that I think about it, as far as like his broader outlook on the world, I don't know if I agree with him on anything. Like, even with blast off meme, no, there is no blast off meme. I already blasted off. I don't know. I don't know if I agree with him on anything, really. Like, he even shat on like the Barbie movie. You know what I mean? Like, I have more that I can agree with like Fem Shapiro, Brett Cooper, the female version of Ben. Why are you hating on Jack Harlow? Ayo, what do you mean? Who am I hating on? What? I guess we agree that the earth is round. That's true. There is that. I'm an archaeologist of the Levant. One of my colleagues, calling himself a lifelong leftist, posted a letter that basically spread all of the IDF's talking points and called Palestinians brainwashed and beyond saving. Bro, that fucking tank guy that was on Twitter, he's a follower of mine. I looked through his fucking likes to see like if he was a hate follower or not. And like he just straight up is the IDF tank guy that may or may not have been killed. That was all over Twitter. Like, who just fucking loves tanks. He's like, I love Merkava tanks. That's why I'm like a tank autist, and I joined the reserves again specifically so that I could drive a tank again. So it's always really interesting seeing, like, obviously we have, you know, the likes of 17-year-old Khaled, who was martyred in Gaza. And then also on the other side, people who follow me who are just like, I like that you say healthcare should be free. You know what I mean? Who also are literally in the IDF and are actively engaging in ethnic cleansing, which I find very strange. You know what I mean? Jack Harlow, nail tech is fire. Do you agree? Okay, take a week off, dude. Come on. I think like if I was me, I would simply not do genocide. I agree. I think like it's a horrifying thing, right? But I guess people just like kind of shut off certain parts of their brain. I've been talking to Felix about this as well. It's just hard for me to believe that these folks really believe the nonsense they spew. You got Israelis hate watching you? No, I don't think so. I think like there's a number of Israelis that are in here right now. You see it in the geolocator, and that's like the entirety of the Israeli left. No, literally. Like every single person, it's like usually in the 20s, every single person that watches me from Israel is literally just like the only 25 people who are like, Palestinians are human beings who should not be ruthlessly slaughtered, and what you're doing is fascism. Please stop. No, I'm not even kidding. I'm not kidding. I mean, they'll say it themselves. We had a representative from the Israeli Knesset. And then also there are obviously Palestinians who are Palestinian citizens of Israel. So there's that too. I'm one of them. I think we are Israeli Arabs, Lemafayal. I see a lot of all the deaths, including the Palestine deaths, are on Hamas. Is Hamas who has the blood on their hands? Yeah, they're Hamas did the Nakba. They've just been around always. It's always Hamas. Also, West Bank, also Hamas. Guys, you have to understand, okay? Hamas is the most violent expression of Palestinian emancipation. It's ruthless. It's brutal. It is a reaction to the ruthless and brutal apartheid. Okay? So that's precisely the reason why everyone that wants to defend Israel's actions try to reduce all matter of Palestinians, or if you're fucking Amy Schumer, every single Arab, as a matter of fact, globally, to the most violent expressions. The ruthless slaughter of Israeli civilians, like every single person, every single Arab, every single Palestinian in Gaza, every single Palestinian in the West Bank, maybe even Palestinian citizens of Israel, they are all supporters of Hamas until disproven. Okay? And this is the only way that you can continue your ethnic cleansing campaign. The way to try and justify this indifference to human life, when the situation is not all that complicated. From a moral perspective, it is not complex at all. Israel's an apartheid state, and this apartheid regime must end. The maintenance of said apartheid state requires a tremendous amount of violence. Palestinians are the recipients of said violence. It is completely unjustifiable. It is completely unacceptable. When people say from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free, they are not saying we are going to wipe out every single Israeli baby and kill them. They mean Palestine should be free for the Palestinians to be able to live in as well. Okay? That's all that means. You can try and desperately move that away to a genocidal ideation, which I will say is very blaring, very obvious on the Israeli side, which no one seems to care about. Okay? No one seems to care about it when you have like members of the Knesset being like, we need to wipe out Gaza. While they're currently wiping out Gaza, I showed you an actual motherfucking poll that said 83% of Israeli Jews, not Arabs, but 83% of Israeli Jews, which comprise 77% of the population, do not care about what happens to the Palestinians in this last siege that Israel is engaging in. Okay? That's an insane number. That is not a normal number. The only reason why that number is so fucking high, don't say no shit they were attacked. Suck my dick. What do you mean no shit they were attacked? They're saying This poll shows, do you care about what happens to Palestinian civilians? Do you understand the words that are coming out of my fucking mouth? Do you care about what happens to Palestinian civilian casualties? 83% say, no, I do not. That's worse than like America post 9/11, dog. What the fuck are you saying? The designation of Israeli Jew versus Israeli Arab is one that the Israeli government has, by the way. It's not mine. Like, I want to know. There's a brain trust in here. I would love for one of you guys to find polling done in apartheid South Africa. I would suspect that the only polling that is as similar, the only polling that could come across as similar to that would probably be in apartheid South Africa. Anyway, this conflation between Hamas and the Palestinians, or also every single Arab, is deliberate. It's by design. It's a way to, drive home the human shield narrative. It gives you like a secondary moral shield. Did Hassan mention anything about the recent comments about him going off on a chatter? What happened now? No, not the 1992 South African apartheid referendum, man. I'm trying to find like actual polling done in apartheid South Africa about like what the white population's perspective on black people was. Okay? In 1986, poll in South Africa shows a rise in whites' distaste for apartheid. By 1986, I guess, South African whites are increasingly happy with the apartheid system, and a majority now want the nationalist leader Nelson Mandela freed from prison, according to a new public opinion poll. In 1986, the survey conducted last month by the polling organization Mori for the Sunday Times of London shows that 45% of whites said they were unhappy with apartheid, up from 32% in a Mori poll last August. Moreover, 56% said Mr. Mandela should be freed, compared to 40% last August. The 1985 survey was conducted under a limited state of emergency before the latest poll. Emergency regulations have been extended nationwide. Interesting. Holy shit. Check the South African National Archives. This isn't true. Please link the 83% poll. I need to show it to my Jewish wife. Here. That's such a weird way to say that, dude. My Jewish wife. What the fuck? Anyway. Here, I'll find the poll real quick. Here. Some noteworthy findings in a poll released by last week by IDI Israel. It's the Israel Democracy Institute. Approximately 70% of Israelis and 83% of Jewish Israelis do not think Palestinian civilian suffering should be considered much or at all when planning the fight. Here you go. And I will take it one step further, okay, which is obvious, I hope, to everyone. This does not mean that all Israeli Jewish citizens deserve to fucking die. I hope that that is clear, except I really don't even have to make that clear, as a matter of fact, because we see Israeli citizens as human beings. We don't see the Palestinian citizens as human beings, which is why there's actually a debate on the other side of the equation. Do all Palestinians deserve to die? Some of them voted for Hamas, even though most of them were fucking not even born back then, or could even vote, but it doesn't matter. What if they all voted for Hamas? Then do they all deserve to die? No. The answer is no. Okay? Jewish, my dad's a Zionist, and I'm pro-Palestine. Do you have any good videos to share? I've tried chatting with them. Just ask him if morally he's okay with civilian casualties, women and children. When is enough? Children, deaths alone, and past casualties of the surprise attack. When is enough? Start there. No, I'm afraid there are especially a lot of older people that you're not going to be able to win over. There's no amount of death and destruction that they will look at and go, no, this is actually, you're right. I don't think you'll be able to convince your dad. I'm going to be honest. Careful, man. You're going to get clipped. Saying what? On a slightly different tangent, I keep seeing the why can't they do Gandhi-style nonviolent demand for independence or just being ahistoric. There absolutely were revolutionary groups doing violence. One of them literally murdered a sitting MP of England in London for freedom of India. Yeah, there's never been in the history of successful emancipatory movements, successful anti-colonial movements that was entirely peaceful. As a matter of fact, in comparison, especially when you look at like the human toll of the apartheid structure and how long it's continued in Israel, the Palestinian revolutionary and violent actions pale in comparison to many of the other successful revolutions in the past, especially because it came with a renunciation of violence in general in order to get any kind of international recognition from the PLO specifically. So the idea, no, this is not a Marxist-Leninist Hassan moment. This is just like any historical, anyone that looks at fucking history will tell you the exact same thing. This is just a historical fact. Anyone who says the opposite is actually ahistorical. I'm just giving you historically accurate information in a sea of misinformation. Okay? The fuck? I'm favoring a one-state solution more and more. I'm a one-stater. I've been a one-stater for many, many years at this point because I realized that the two-state solution was simply brought about as a way to continue building new settlements. Like building new settlements over and over again in the West Bank and continuing to push Palestinians out of their homes. Yeah, your clips are circulating with normies. My conservative sister, oh my God, did you hear Hassan said Israeli babies are settlers? How disgusting. Yes. No matter what you do, if you've been in here for the past 3 weeks, you know how fucking careful I am with the way I conduct myself because I know how this works. I know how quickly words can be weaponized against you. And, you know, it's just no matter what happens, you know, I've fucking started every goddamn conversation for the past 3 weeks by condemning Hamas, by condemning Hamas, by condemning Hamas. But it still doesn't matter. They still say, people still turn around and say, I fucking love executing, beheading like little babies, and I call them all settlers or whatever. When you cannot find like an actual decent clip, then you just fucking make it up as you go along. Violence is bad. I abhor violence. Okay, not to come across like Selena Gomez here, but I think violence is awful. And if you want to end the violence, you have to end the apartheid because the apartheid is violent. There is no way to peacefully ethnically cleanse people. There's no way to peacefully ethnically displace people. This is why many people who are now in support of Israel, who I remember from their old fucking debate lord days when they would debate Nazis, would ask them this very simple question. How can you peacefully ethnically displace millions of people? What do you do when they do not fucking leave? Well, we know what they do. We know what one does when people don't leave. Okay? Like it's that simple. There's no amount of mainstream media massaging the circumstance for you to be able to come across as you are morally consistent on the matter. It is no different than looking at the Jim Crow South and going, well, everybody says it's separate but equal. I'm a dumbass. So I also believe it's separate but equal. Or looking at, here's a contemporary example, looking at the abortion, like the anti-abortion movement, okay, and going, well, they call themselves pro-life. They must be pro-life then. And not pro-forcing women to carry abortions to term. there's always a level of bias that is like, you know, playing a huge role in how motivated you are to believe certain narratives, okay? That's it. Or did I say carry abortion is the term? I meant carry pregnancy is the term. Forcibly carry pregnancy is the term. When asked if the IDF should not break international law and rules of war, 53% of the public agreed, but Jewish, Arab, Palestinian, Israelis answered very differently. 60% of Jewish Israelis were lukewarm. 71% of Palestinians strongly agreed. Do you agree or disagree that undertaking military operations, the IDF should ensure that it is not breaking international laws and rules of war? Strongly agree, and some would agree. Arabs, 71% strongly agree. Also interesting that, according to this poll, more Jewish Israelis, 19.4, strongly agreed that the IDF should follow international law and rules of war than strongly, strongly disagreed. A plurality of Jewish Israelis, 33% polled, somewhat agreed with this statement. The poll also shows the overwhelming majority, 90% of Jewish Israelis, opposed stopping the fight in return for a deal with Hamas that swaps Israeli hostages for Hamas prisoners. Results on this question are massively skewed, by the way. Jewish Israelis and Arab Palestinian Israeli minority. Yeah. The Arabs, according to the internal way of recognizing Palestinian citizens of Israel versus, actual citizens of Israel, I guess, who are Jewish, which are still comprised of Arab Jews. There's a reason for this specific designation. The Jews versus Arabs designation, while there are millions of Jewish Arabs in Israel, why are they called Jews instead of Arabs? Well, because it's a fucking apartheid state, okay? When they say Arabs, they do not mean Jewish Arabs. Like Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is an Arab Jew, is not a part of this, okay? He's on the other side. He's considered Jewish. He's Kurdish. He's not Arab. He's half Kurdish, half Arab. Shut the fuck up. They are Mizrahi Jews. Yes. This is a separate designation, but it just means Arab Jews, okay? Jews from Morocco, Jews from Lebanon, Jews from Syria, Iraq. These are people who are Arab. Internally, they don't consider themselves to be Arab because it's fucking racist. Like, what do you want? What do you mean? That designation in and of itself is one that you can only have in a fucking apartheid structure. That's the whole point. Israeli here, do you think Israel's continuously loosening gun laws will lead it to look a lot more like the U.S. in terms of gun violence, both inside and outside the West Bank? Yeah, I mean, as long as there are... Here, I'll tell you this much. First of all, yes, okay? Secondly, as long as there are people that are Arabs, right, in Israel... There's always like a target that you can release all of your hatred on. But in that process, all of these fucking psychopaths are going to start killing each other because of the distinction that I just gave you, which is that there are a shit ton of Arab Jews. If you're making a heat of the moment mass shooting decision, you're going to end up killing a lot of Arab Jews because you're going to think, well, they're also, they're Arab. I don't fucking know. This already happens sometimes. There's a reason why there has to be a massive checkpoint system inside of the West Bank. I've talked about this quite a bit. The whole like settler baby misquote comes from that. It's quite simple. The West Bank is internationally recognized as Palestinian territory. However, there are 400,000 settlers there. Those settlers are illegally there. They are violating the law. Okay? They are violating the law. They are not supposed to be there. They are immorally sitting on land that they have forcibly taken from Palestinians. Now, under international law, violently seizing back that land would be a just act. It is perfectly legal. Israel knows this, which is precisely why they maintain an occupation there. That is the reason why the IDF is the standing military that is occupying Palestinian territory and has for 56 fucking years. That's it. Because the Israeli occupying force has to maintain this unjust, illegal occupation, or else, if the Palestinians fought back, it would literally be legal in the West Bank. Israelis in where I live, where it's very far from Gaza and there wasn't rockets, but still have guns to protect themselves. Yes. It is a two-part project. They need to know who is and who is not, hence the apartheid. Also, long-term goal of whitening Israelis. Yes, there's also that part as well. Why do we expect the West to stand against this when they've done the same shit plenty of times in South Africa? Even the creation of the USA was based off killing Native Americans. One, because it's happening right now. And it's happening with one of our most important allies. One of our most important allies has been doing it for the past 75 years, and especially so for the past 55. Right? So that's a little bit different. Doing it now is a little bit different than doing it like fucking 300 years ago. It was fucked up back then as well. And you're kind of getting an understanding as to how the world allowed it to happen. Specifically, the Holocaust was not that long ago. And you absolutely understand when you look at a situation like the ongoing apartheid and the violence of its maintenance in the West Bank, in Gaza, the ethnic cleansing happening in Gaza right now, and how the Western world not only offers logistical support, material support, bombs that they can use on those Palestinian children, but also collectively tries to change people's attitudes about this the situation and attack anyone and everyone, and maybe even take legal action against those who dare speak out against these atrocities that are happening with our money. Okay, you start developing a better understanding of how appeasement worked in the Western world. Anyway, this poll shows yes immediately, but don't stop the fighting. Not right now, only at the end of the fighting. Yes immediately, even if it means halting the fighting. No, don't stop the fighting at all. In your opinion, should the state of Israel conduct negotiations with Hamas for the release of kidnapped Israelis in return for the release of Hamas prisoners from Israeli prisons? Okay, only 9% of Israeli Jews said yes immediately, even if it means halting the fighting. 36.7% said yes, immediately negotiate, but don't stop the fighting. 15.6% said not right now, only at the end of the fighting. And 26.6% said no. So 90% of Jewish Israelis oppose stopping the fighting in return for a deal with Hamas that swaps Israeli hostages for Hamas's prisoners. Okay? For Hamas's hostages for Israeli hostages. The survey says Hamas, how biased? No, well, it is Hamas that has the Israeli hostages right now. Israeli society is very divided on whether its government has a clear plan for the next phase of the operation in Gaza. This is perhaps one of the most damning parts of this, is that everyone almost universally agrees that currently the Israeli administration has no idea what the fuck to do with Gaza. There are obviously competing interests, like the Smotriches of the world want to fucking raise Gaza and turn it into a parking lot for Israel. Okay? There are right-wing think tanks close to Benjamin Netanyahu that are like early on just basically subtly releasing information as to how they will deal with Gaza. Okay? This usually happens in all imperial conquest. Okay? An annexation, a permanent annexation of Gaza, new walls being brought up, potentially. But ultimately, they do not know how they will be able to maintain this annexation. Like they're not even thinking about it, because an annexation of this sort would be incredibly difficult. Annexation is very difficult, especially when you're going into like neighboring regions, neighboring areas. Especially when the people have developed a sense of militancy against it. Anyway, did you see they admitted they wanted to genocide Gaza? Yes, time and time again. They have. I don't know why people don't hear it when prominent Israeli ministers, officials openly say it. And yeah, Ben Shapiro, who is in America and does not live in Israel, is saying to Mohammed Hijab, which I, by the way, told you that this is what Israel would say in this circumstance. If a Hamas commander was hiding in an Israeli nursery with thousands of Jewish babies, would it be legitimate to blow up the entire nursery? You will not win this. This is not a logical conundrum for someone who is a rugged ultra-Zionist. A rugged ultra-Zionist will literally say, yes, you sometimes have to kill Israeli babies as well. What do you not understand? The moment that you recognize that the Israeli nation state as an ethno-state, the project lies on destroying all Palestinians, and those who believe in said ethno-nationalist ideals will always openly tell you that they care more about the death and destruction and ethnic displacement of Palestinians than they do about Israeli security. Okay? The quicker you recognize that a lot of ultra-Zionists simply just want to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians from this land more than they care about defending Jews or defending Israelis in general. Okay? The easier it is for you to comprehend what's going on. So Ben immediately responded. He said, Israel is literally bombing tunnels right now, despite the fact that Hamas could be hiding Jewish babies in there. Military necessity is the question. Question for you, Mohammed, since we're here. This would end if Hamas surrendered. Why aren't you calling on them to do so? First of all, it wouldn't. What a ridiculous take. He says, since you're responding to me on tweet, why don't you respond to me in person? If you fear security as you did at Oxford, we could do it through Piers Uncensored. Will you accept? That's why I told you guys, like, this is not a fucking, logical bind you can find. This is not a logical bind you can find. The most aggressive ultra-Zionists, they will openly say, yes, bomb the babies, bomb the Israeli babies, as long as you can kill enough Palestinians in the process. Okay? That's it. And what, in your opinion, what percentage of Israel is ultra-Zionist? Is that the majority? I don't know what percentage of Israelis are ultra-Zionist. I simply know that approximately 70% of Israelis and 83% of Jewish Israelis do not think Palestinian civilian suffering should be considered much or at all when planning the fight. To what extent do you think Israel should take into consideration the suffering of the civilian Palestinian population in Gaza when planning the next phases of fighting there? 47% of Israeli Jews said not at all, and 35.9% said not so much. The 5.2% of Israeli Jews and the 62% and the 21% of Palestinian citizens of Israel, designated as Arabs in this poll, those are they comprise the Israeli left, okay? To varying degrees. Like this group right here, is the Israeli left. So in the general public, the people that care about the civilian Palestinian population quite a lot or very much, this number reflects the overall population percentage that cares. Is it possible to be a jingoist Israeli? What do you mean? You mean the opposite is it possible? You must be asking me, is it possible to be a jingoist, an Western chauvinist, anti-jingoist Israeli, in which case the numbers are there. There you go. Don't forget, Palestinians are the ones who taught to hate Jews. Yeah. Here's the thing, okay? And this poll is important for a lot of you to understand. I have very carefully, and I'll admit, deliberately not necessarily talked about the overarching attitudes in Israel towards the Palestinian plight, towards the Palestinian condition. Part of the reason why is because I do not believe that Israel actually represents the interests of Jews all around the world. I certainly do not believe that, no matter how hard some members of the IDF or some members of the Israeli government or defenders of Israel try to claim it does. Okay? I don't believe that. I think that is anti-Semitic. However, I also do understand that constantly and consistently showing you exactly how racist some Israelis get when discussing the issue of Palestine, I fear that people will inevitably make this leap and actually start developing anti-Semitic sentiment. This is part of the reason why, in an effort to combat anti-Semitism, I don't show you this, because it's not. It's not a thing. This does not represent Jews at all. That's why you see so many Jews in the United States of America and all around the world, as a matter of fact, at the forefront of anti-Zionism. At the forefront of anti-Zionist protests. Vivian knows more than you. I've heard many people use the argument that most Israelis are not in favor of Netanyahu's regime, but that poll seems to show that they are actually more aligned with him than more people say. I feel like that's important to note. Yes, people are not. I talked about this before. I talked about this during the protests, during the Supreme Court protests. Israel has two secular institutions, okay? The motherfucking Supreme Court and the motherfucking IDF. Both of them are still very violent towards Palestinians. You have to understand something. When people were protesting the Supreme Court, they were not protesting it on the basis of like cruelty towards Palestinians or the continuation of the apartheid. Okay? They were protesting, never do that for Muslims. That's insane that you think I never do that for Muslims. That's insane that you think that. First of all, I grew up in a fucking Muslim country. Shut the fuck up. I mean, I'm sick and tired of your fucking bullshit. If you think I don't sit around and engage in like the most Islamophobic, psychotic nonsense by showing like memory TV memes or whatever to be like, look, this is what every fucking Muslim believes. Is that what you're claiming that I'm doing here? I know how to fucking present an argument in a biased way. You might mean they never do that for Muslims. Yeah, well, Sufi Masoodi loves fucking shitting on me on my coverage and says I'm Islamophobic or something. Anyway, my point is, part of the reason why I don't like showing the Israeli opinion and how fucking violent and ruthless it is because the Israeli opinion on Palestinians is unironically the opinion of a colonial fascist movement. Of course it's going to be like that. It's pure projection when you see Israeli media or American Zionists turning around and going, look at how much they hate Jews. Look at these Palestinian children. Look at how much they hate Jews. They're learning to hate the Jews. When, in fact, it's not learning to hate the Jews. It's learning to hate Israel. And they're not learning it in fucking schools. They're learning it by living in it, okay? Ridiculous. On the other side, if you are actually the colonial power in this regard, the one who holds all the keys, the one who holds all the power in this regard, the state that is maintaining the apartheid, you do have to teach that fucking hatred. I'll give you an example from America. A lot of you are woke, right? You're woke. Black people don't learn to hate white people from from you know, the CRT and like woke schooling. Okay, they learn to hate white supremacy by living in a white supremacist country. They live in it and they experience it. But the inverse of that is not true. You have to teach in a segregated society, you have to teach your children to personally hate and to turn a blind eye to oppression and cruelty that black and brown people are disproportionately subjected to. Okay? Anyway. One day when it's safe, when there's no personal downside to calling a thing what it is, when it's too late to hold anyone accountable, everyone will have always been against this. This is what Gaza looks like right now. What an insane circumstance that, like, reporting on this as it actually is deemed an anti-Semitic act by horrifyingly bad faith actors in this regard. You have to say unconditionally that this had to have happened. This had to happen. This must happen, and more of it must happen, or else we will just shamelessly say that you are anti-Semitic. We will talk over the many Jewish people here in America that look at this and say this is completely unacceptable. We will side with many actual open anti-Semites that look at this and demand more of it. Because do not forget, the American Jewish population is not that large. The American evangelical population, however, is. So when we look at the numbers and people try to say, well, anti-Zionist Jews are actually in the margins, they're a tiny population. Yeah, so are Zionist Jews, man. In comparison to the largest supporters in this fucking country, evangelical Christians who are in support of Zionism is a much larger constituency. Yeah, it's exactly what the former Israeli prime minister said. An unbiased view showing both sides is pro-Hamas. We have U.S. reps calling Palestinian civilians Nazis. Well, I mean, this guy is literally the perfect example of the absolute psychopath. This dumbass didn't know shit about Israel or Palestine in 2005. And then some campus protesters called him the devil. So he decided to ship his bitch ass out to the fucking IDF in Israel as a Christian, evangelical Christian. He went and he signed up for the IDF. But I believe at that point his legs were blown off already, so he couldn't actually, like, fight on the front lines. So he just sat back and just fucking packed up medkits and shit. Motherfucker, like, he's just like, I'm so bloodthirsty, dog. You don't understand. Like, you don't understand, motherfucker. I'm so bloodthirsty.
As a whole, I would encourage the other side to not so lightly throw around the idea of innocent Palestinian civilians, as is frequently said. I don't think we would so lightly throw around the term innocent Nazi civilians during World War II.
Yeah, dude. That's what I'm saying, though. Like, the invocation of the Holocaust and Nazis is not one that will always favor Israel in this regard. When you look at a machine of cruelty, when you look at a machine of so much death and destruction, I don't think it's the fucking Palestinians that fit the bill. When you think about the industrialized mechanisms of death, it's not. Thought the motherfuckers like strapping on rocket-propelled grenades to fight against Merkava tanks with a trophy system, 2 at a fucking time. Not the dudes dropping fucking drone bombs, drone grenades, and shit like that. Piers Morgan on Bassem is live. All right, we'll get to it. I oppose reactionary right-wing sentiment. It does not matter what country holds reactionary right-wing sentiment. This is why, politically, I am opposed to Hamas. That is ultimately a right-wing, reactionary, fundamentalist operation. But I'm also not a fucking moron. I recognize, as one does, by looking at a century of conflict, not just in Israel, but in the Middle East in general. Video unavailable on my end. We need to find a way to get around this. I recognize that kind of right-wing reactionary sentiment takes root when you are constantly being bombarded, when you're constantly being owned, when you're constantly being humiliated, when you are living under an apartheid structure. I want to end the reactionary right-wing attitude, and the only way to do that is not by consistently bombing and consistently blowing up Palestinian children, but to actually engage in peace. And that very same Shift Control C, delete the block. Wait, what do you mean? How do you do that? Am I a script kiddie now? How do I delete it? I'm trying to fucking hack, dude. I'm trying to hack it. Welcome to the hacker zone. All right, whatever. We'll just won't do that. Okay, we'll figure out a different way, hopefully. Here's how. Go to share the YouTube vid, then go into embed and play the vid. It only lets me save right now at this point. It won't let me share the vid. Okay, I'm not going to download a VPN. Everybody, chill out. Let me finish what I was trying to say. Let me finish what I was trying to fucking say. The same right-wing forces very much exist inside of Israel. And the same right-wing forces inside of Israel are currently dominating all aspects of Palestinian life. Okay? So if this is a battle between right-wingers versus right-wingers, ultimately, the side that has the military machine is the side that has all the power to reduce the flames. That's the side that can end the conflict.
And it was, yeah, and actually we agreed.
Anyway, let's watch Bassem Youssef versus Piers Morgan now.
I was, don't know about you, maybe you weren't surprised. I was completely staggered by the response globally to our interview several weeks ago. Were you taken aback by the
Bro, he's such a Klaus shark. He
Yes,
he changed.
of course.
He switched sides, bro. I swear to
understand.
God. The only side that matters right now
For
for
many
you,
years,
though,
the
is the top of the
media
hour ad break
covering the Middle
avoidance
East
side.
has been showing a certain point of view. I'm not
Third
gonna
streamer
say
doesn't know about
biased,
DNS
but
222.
I
Bitch,
would
I've been in
say
America
it
for
did
that
not
reason.
allow certain voices, certain voices from the other side to be heard, and that is why you see the frustration. Whenever you speak to people in the Middle East, they tell you the same thing. They're not very happy with the coverage of the Middle East because our voices are not heard. Now, I am the least qualified person ever to talk about this conflict. And yet, just because I relate some of the talking points that we say and we hear the whole time, people felt heard. And when people have this feeling, they're happy. They have this response. They say, "Oh my God, for the first time, the West are actually hearing our point
He's
of
so
view."
right.
Some of the points
He's
of view
so
might
fucking
not
right.
go well with other people, but at least we have a conversation. And I think that is the reason why people reacted that way. Yeah.
It's such an incendiary subject matter. I've never seen social media so ablaze with hostility on both sides. Did you actually, as well as enormous praise from the Arab world, did you also get criticized by some parts of the Arab world for not going perhaps hard enough?
Oh, you didn't do that, you didn't do that. The thing is, this is like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you're not.
Right.
If you don't speak up, why don't you speak up? If you speak up, you didn't speak up enough. If you're
I
done,
hope-
why are you do? If you speak up too much, oh.
I hope Piers doesn't just like fucking use Bassem's like media interest, like, because he's a media guy, to just like drive the conversation away to
like
dumb
a
shit.
rule on social media. But yeah, there was a backlash, but there's also a backlash from the other side, which I mean here and other comedy clubs, I worked with people from all kinds of different backgrounds, Jewish, Christians, Muslims, Arabs, atheists, all kinds of people. And there are a lot of people who went to my socials like, oh, so you're a terrorist sympathizer now, you know? And I think it is important to have a nuanced, deep, interesting, intelligent conversation. A lot of people waiting for this are kind of like, yeah, Bassem, bury Piers, show him. And this is the problem with the news today. The problem is the news today, it's not about the news anymore. It's about the people giving you the news. So it becomes a show, a circus. Two gladiators in the Colosseum, two pigs fighting in the mud. And this is why people don't get anything out of it. It's a circus.
You know, one of the things I heard a lot was, who is this guy? And they weren't talking about me.
Sometimes I wonder.
Now, obviously, you're very, very well known in the Arab world. You're known as the kind of, they called you the Arab Jon Stewart, and you're well known in America, but you weren't that well known, for example, in the UK. And I think what this interview did, it made a lot of people think, wow, all right, this is incredible. But tell me more about Bassem Youssef. And I did a bit of research into your life, and it is a fascinating journey that you've gone on to get here to Los Angeles. And I think it's worth just taking a little beat here to talk about this, because you began in Cairo as a heart surgeon. I mean, that was your career path.
Yes.
And,
yes.
and you were a heart surgeon.
I was a heart surgeon until, I spent 19 years in that career, 7 years in medical school, 12 years as a practicing doctor. And 2011 happened, and the revolution happened, and I had my own show on YouTube. I did like small videos.
Well, I'm going to come to this, because I was by coincidence, I had just joined CNN to replace the great Larry King. And I hadn't actually done any live show. I'd done a few weeks since I joined of taped interviews with big names, Donald Trump, Oprah Winfrey, things like that. And I was flying back to Los Angeles when I got a message that Egypt was going up in the start of the Arab Spring. And I actually went to a studio very near here, about a mile down the road on Sunset, the CNN studio, the old Larry King studio. And I went live for the first time, and it was about the Arab Spring, and it was about what was happening in Egypt. And at the same time, you, in Egypt, were actually in Tahrir Square, helping wounded protesters, actually medically treating them.
Yeah, I mean, this was a kind of movement that inspired a lot of Egyptians. At the time, I was in the hospital, and a lot of people just had volunteered, and the nurses were just like giving us like supplies, go, and we were going there, and we were basically tending to the wounded, because it is, and it kind of gives you a different perspective when you see helpless, defenseless people who are not armed. They are being beaten by security forces, military forces, being shot, being, hurt. And all we can do is just like provide some medical attention. And it kind of gives you a perspective to see how humanity sometimes can show its most ugly face.
And the suppression of free speech, freedom of expression, the ability of people to say what they honestly feel about a situation, and the suppression of people's basic rights to freedom.
Absolutely, yeah. And that kind of like taught me a lot and inspired me to do the show. But
Well, you start. I mean, it's a crazy story, this, and I want to tell it because you just decide to do 5-minute stuff on YouTube.
Yeah.
And you're expecting a few people to watch it. And then literally it just flies. And suddenly you're getting millions of people watching this. And very quickly, one of the big networks comes in. And then you're suddenly doing this stuff for 30 to 40 million people. Like a third of the entire population of Egypt is tuning in to watch it. You're the biggest star of Egyptian television.
Oh, please.
You were.
Don't stop.
No, but I mean, what an extraordinary thing, though, for a heart surgeon to go from helping protesters medically in Tahrir Square at the start of the Arab Spring to within a year, you're the biggest star on Egyptian television. It's a crazy thing.
It doesn't sound as glamorous.
Stop, dude. Why? Dude, this is so dumb. Anyone who knows they have a fucking moment of opportunity in fucking Western media in front of such a large audience knows that the goal is to fucking talk about Palestinians, talk about Palestinians, talk about Palestinians. Stop glazing yourself up, man. Holy shit. I think he's very good. I think he's very good at talking about the situation on the ground. But it's like, I don't, fuck. Can you just explain how the media people become the highlight of the news and transition into glazing each other? Yeah, I know. I hate this.
Well, many reasons.
This is why I did not want to fucking have a conversation with Piers Morgan about, like, propaganda or who's a propagandist or whatever. Not because, like, oh, it's an indefensible position. No, I love debating. No matter how much I fucking abhor debate purgatory, I debate for fucking hours, okay? I'm stubborn as shit. I'm a stubborn motherfucker. It's just that right now, this is a idiotic fucking time to talk about it. It's selfish.
It was a warrant for my arrest, and then I turned myself in, and I was interrogated, and it was the funniest interrogation ever. And in my stand-up shows, I talk about that scene.
Because the guards were reading the stuff out and laughing, right?
Well, the guards were taking selfies with me, which is funny. Right. the exchange between me and the prosecutor, general prosecutor, was extremely funny. I mean, I don't like to victimize myself. I don't like, oh, look at that. I actually like to find humor.
But why were you arrested? What was the criteria?
Oh, yeah. I think the list was insulting Islam, insulting the president, spreading false rumors, and disrupting the fabric of society. And it was, I think the people in the room didn't know what to do with me because they ended up discussing my jokes. So it turned into a writer's room. And I was kind of like, how do you think we make this funnier? And it was the funniest exchange ever. And after 6 hours, I was let go. And
was it scary, though, at the same time, that suddenly the machinery was getting a grip of you? Because it was to get a lot scarier. But was it in that moment when you first got arrested, you thought, I'm being arrested for breaching my freedom of speech, right?
For some reason,
oh my God,
I just like went with the flow. I went to the interrogation wearing the big hat. I went to the show. It was.
I don't want to talk about like internal Egyptian politics, okay? And I have stopped short of discussing like Bassem Youssef's own personal perspective on Egyptian politics in general. I hate that like there's a Israel at war ticker on the bottom of the fucking show, and they're just like talking about this shit. Hassan, the interview is 2 hours. You got to chill. I know, but this is the most important part of the interview. This is the part that people watch, and the part that people watch is just like his background.
Interesting story, because the first episode that was aired after the removal in the Muslim Brotherhood, everybody was waiting to see what I will say. Because by that time,
well, now he's talking about it. Okay, never mind.
Like me and Islamic Child, like it's like they had 5 channels, and they were like me and them going like that. They had like 5 channels and have only 1 hour a week, and then they were removed. And then a lot of the other dissident voices were also being shut down. Now people are waiting. What will Bassem say?
Yeah,
and
what will he say?
On the day that the show aired,
I know what
the
he
next
said.
day I went out, and everybody's like, good, at least somebody is speaking. It was a very controversial episode. Nobody liked it, and yet everybody liked it, because people said like, you're supporting the coup, no, you're the Muslim Brotherhood. everybody accused me of something. All I did in that episode was just being a mirror of what is happening in the street and showing them how ridiculous it is.
You didn't take your fixed position.
Well, my position, depending on what's your position?
What did you intend your position to be?
My position was to show the ridiculousness of how the people now was like, oh, we got rid of Islamic fascism, but we are heading towards another fascism. There was a song that I did that was very controversial. People, and it's very funny, the pro-Muslim Brotherhood thought that this is a disrespect to the people who died. And on the other side, the people said that this is a disrespect to the army. And when you manage to offend everybody, you know you're right.
Yes.
Oh
And
my
then the people in the
God.
middle, it's like, oh, you weren't tough enough. And I was told, that's like, why didn't you go after? The ceiling of freedom just went down, and I was just like, it was very difficult. It is very difficult to go against an authority that was very popular at the time.
And especially a military authority with
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of experience
Oh yeah.
of weaponizing these situations.
Yeah.
You had death threats.
People would always choose, most of the time, they will always choose the military form rather than the religious form, because they kind of like, at least they are not infringing on my personal freedom. Not yet. But
you had threats on your life, didn't you?
oh, all the time. I don't talk about that because like I have been having death threats, like never stopped since 2011. Never stopped.
Have they continued since our last interview?
Oh yeah, they never stopped.
People threatening to kill you?
All the time.
Why? For what reason?
Oh, for just saying something that they don't like. Oh, because you are against Egypt, you're against Islam, you're against our...
The problem is the guy that was fucking overthrown was a popularly elected Muslim Brotherhood guy. And the issue is that he was overthrown with a violent military coup. Okay. And the violent military coup that took place, that also killed a shit ton of fucking protesters, as a matter of fact, was conducted by U.S. aligned forces that were supposedly fucking liberal. Oh, what the fuck? What's going on? Is there an ad break? What? They just hit us with a commercial break? The problem always is that and Sisi, who they now have, was a high-ranking official in the security forces. Yeah. The problem is always that your vote for Islamic Brotherhood? No way. No. The issue always, when it comes to affairs in other countries, is that it is more complex than the way you understand it. It doesn't matter. Like anything and everything that people do, if it does not serve America's interests, will always be used against them. So the people always are stuck between a rock and a hard place. Okay? Mossad was only popular amongst Muslim Brotherhood members, and people wanted him out, but didn't want another military piece of shit, but the revolution got hijacked. This has happened time and time again this has happened in Turkey as well. This happens everywhere. It also, it's a constant. It's a constant in places like Turkey as well. It's a constant in places like Iran as well. You have Western influence that creates a lot of anger and resentment in the population, a lot of death and destruction at the behest of Western-backed leadership that causes people to find emancipation in the most reactionary forces, in the most reactionary groups, in the most reactionary ideologies. Okay? Like, Iran is right there. It is a perfect representation of this. It is seen as an anti-Western force. And of course, they are brutal. Of course, they are theocratic. Of course, they're awful. Not a single person, not a single leftist, for example, living in Iran will tell you otherwise. Like, nobody wants to live under a theocratic dictatorship, okay? Nobody. It's not great. But you can't have a democratic process if you're constantly fucking waging war against the most important, most powerful military machine on the planet.
With your lawyer said you got to get out of it. You got to get out of Egypt. It's getting too dangerous.
Yeah.
Something bad's going to happen. You're going to get arrested again and probably thrown in jail, or you're going to try and kill you. And you flee to Dubai, and then you end up here in America.
Yes.
Was that always the plan, to eventually come to America, or was it expediency because of what happened?
Well, it's funny that you said that, because I visited the United States after the first year of my show. And a doctor that's there, an Egyptian doctor, has been there for a while. I said, listen, Bassem, you are very visible in the media, and I think you can use that to apply for a green card as a special talent. And I did. And it's like, I have like a huge show in Egypt.
It's actually the criteria, because I have the same.
Yeah.
Is an alien of exceptional ability.
Yes.
Is what they call you.
Yes, we're
charmingly.
Yes, we're very
exceptionally able aliens.
We are, but we're still aliens.
Yeah, yeah. I know. It always makes me laugh. Like, you can come here, but you are an alien.
You're an alien, but you're exceptional.
Yeah.
And I just applied for it, and I got it. I got the time 100. That helped bolster my application. I said, maybe I'm not going to use it. And then when that happens, the green card came handy. So a lot of people think that I'm here on asylum. I'm not. It was just a strike of luck.
You now do stand-up. You've done it for 5 years. And fascinatingly, you do some of it for an Arab audience.
You have a whole show in Arabic and
an English-speaking version.
Yes.
And they're probably very different, right?
Totally
because
different.
Different sensibilities, different humor, different crowds, different expectation.
Yes. Well, when the Arab audience come to my show, they expect that's going to be another version of my show that I did in Egypt. And I said, no, it's my personal story. Even then, this weekend, right before I met you, because of our interview, I sold out Arizona.
Really?
Yes. And I stood, and the first.
Oh my God, I don't like this. This shit gives me more respect for commentators like you didn't flinch from the topics and weeks. Yeah, I don't think that this is like. Do you want to know how little anyone cares about Egypt? Check this: the Rabaa massacre. Yeah, on August 14th, 2013, the Egyptian police, and to a lesser extent the armed forces, under the command of then Defense Minister Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, dispersed 2 camps of protesters in Cairo. One at the Al-Nahda Square, and a larger one at the Rabaa al-Adawiya Square, the 2 sites that had been occupied by supporters of President Mohammed Morsi, who had been removed from office by a military little over a month earlier following mass protests against his rule. Okay? Initiatives to end the 6-week sit-ins by peaceful means had failed, and the camps were cleared out within hours. Human Rights Watch described the sit-in dispersals as crimes against humanity and called them one of the world's largest killings of demonstrators in a single day in recent history, in reference to the numerous deaths that occurred. The exact death toll during the incident is unclear, and multiple sources have given conflicting estimates. Human Rights Watch states that at least 904 protesters were killed, 817 in Rabaa Square and 87 in Al-Nahda Square, while strongly suggesting that at least 1,000 protesters died during the dispersal. The Egyptian Health Ministry announced that 593 protesters and 43 police officers were killed, and at least 3,994 individuals were injured. I will not be showing you the actual photos. Oh, they do have some of the casualty photos. Okay. The background is, following the 2011 Egyptian revolution, which ousted Hosni Mubarak, and subsequent instability, mass protests calling for the resignation of President Mohammed Morsi culminated in the 2013 Egyptian coup d'etat. Prior to the anti-Morsi uprising, supporters of the deposed president occupied 2 squares, Rabaa al-Adawiya in Nasser City in Cairo and Al-Nahda in Giza, originally to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of his presidency, but from the 3rd of July onwards to protest his ouster, vowing to remain there until Morsi was reinstated. Authorities delayed clearing the two protest camps as internal and external reconciliation processes were established to attempt to resolve this crisis peacefully. According to the military, the sit-ins were flashpoints for outbreaks of violence and bloody confrontations among pro-Morsi and anti-Morsi demonstrators and security forces. Oh, they're on Palestine now? Okay, let's talk. All right, let's get back to this. We'll cover Egyptian politics and how important it is to Palestinian politics again.
Okay? This time I'm ready for the humor.
Oh, you're ready, okay.
No, but it's interesting because last time I was very taken aback. And I remember thinking, as you were doing this right off the top, I remember feeling very uncomfortable, unusually uncomfortable, and thinking I didn't know how to react to that. I didn't know whether I was supposed to laugh or be silent, and I sort of ended up sort of slightly grimacing.
Doesn't mean his takes on Palestine are wrong. They're not.
And I realized it was very powerful what you were doing. It was satirical, but it was savagely satirical and extremely effective. And that's why I think the interview did so well.
You know why? Because all I did was just take the talking points that's been in the media, not just for after October 7th, all through the conflict. It's always like, we need to kill it. All right. You need to kill 5? No, kill 10. You need to kill some? No, kill all. This is what satire does. It take reality, flip it on its head, exaggerate it, and then you can see how sometimes very uncomfortable and even sometimes stupid that sounds. Because I was just reacting to whatever the media is telling me. It's like, oh yeah, okay, do it. There's no pushback. So suddenly, the person who's proposing the most extreme measures is like, oh, we'll take it. Oh, no, that's too much. So that was like a very simple technique. I just took the talking point and just exaggerated.
It was devastatingly effective, I thought. Yeah. First, before we go any further, how is your wife's family? Because she is half Palestinian.
Yeah.
Are they okay?
They're good. They're good. They are safe for now.
Yeah.
And as like that last week, there was no internet, as you have.
Yes.
You know, I saw you tweet at the IDF. It's like, how can they know?
You know how many views that tweet's had? Nearly 40 million.
Yeah.
Me just saying, how are they going to see this message if you've cut the internet off?
Yeah.
Activists who led the revolution in 2011 protested again after Morsi insisted he had powers that the Constitution didn't give him. The rule of law wasn't honored, and this conflict led to the military taking advantage of the situation. There's a lot of context that the Wikipedia article can't give.
That tweet I did was enormous, as everything is in this thing. And I had a lot of people say, finally, Piers, you get it, right? Finally, you get it. And I wanted to say, listen, I'm trying to reach a place where I get this, but it's an incredibly complicated issue for someone who is not Arabic or Jewish to poke their head into. And I've had to cover it as a journalist for a long, long time. I think I said to you before that I was editor of the Daily Mirror in England when we opposed the Iraq War, for example. So, you know, I have taken stands on this thing. On this one, I find, and I'm going to be completely straight with you, I discussed this with Jordan Peterson.
I don't think the Israeli apartheid regime is complicated, but if you're going to talk about Egypt, it is certainly more complicated.
And he was actually very self-reflective about that in the interview we did this week, where he later issued a 20-minute video because he said sometimes a one-line tweet can be unnecessarily inflammatory to people. Much better to take time to explain it. Here's where I've got to with this conflict now. I viewed what happened on October the 7th as an absolutely appalling atrocity, a terror attack of unimaginable horror. And I absolutely think that Israel has a right to defend itself from the people who committed it, Hamas. And I've questioned for the last 3-4 weeks, what is a proportionate response? And I have said repeatedly, I don't know the answer. I want people who have a view to have a view about that. And I'll ask you again about where you think we are with this. I also acknowledge that Hamas live amongst civilian population in Gaza. And therefore, if you do what the Israelis are currently doing, which is a ground offensive into Gaza, a lot of civilians are going to get killed. And at what point does that become disproportionate or even illegal? And I don't know the answers to those questions. And I have a moral quandary because my instinct is to say that Israel has no choice but to respond to what happened in a very forceful manner. I understand why they want to eliminate Hamas altogether. I understand that if they feel they can, then perhaps we can move to a two-state solution or peace or whatever it may be, although I don't think Netanyahu will ever be the person to do that. But the moral question for me is at what point does this become disproportionate? And when you see thousands of children being killed in Gaza, it fills me with utter horror. And then people say, well, do you condemn it? And I find it very easy to condemn Israel turning off the water, Israel turning off the power. I think it's terrible what's happening in the West Bank with the settlers. I think that the stuff there is completely easy to condemn. But can I, hand on heart, condemn Israel trying to destroy Hamas after what they did on October the 7th? That is where I'm struggling to find myself saying I condemn it, because I believe that they are right to try and destroy Hamas. Now, what do you feel about my moral quandary?
Well, there's a lot of points, very lot, and I think this will kind of like lead the ground rules for that interview. There is a whole thing about like Israel right to defend itself, the condemnation. First of all, let's start with condemnation.
Yes.
You want my opinion?
Yes.
Condemning Hamas or condemning Israel?
Yes.
Completely useless. Completely useless.
Why?
I condemn Hamas, you condemn Israel, interview is over. What happened? Nothing. It is just checkpoints, like morality checkpoints.
But I've interviewed a lot of pro-Palestinians, for example, some of whom will immediately say, I unreservedly condemn the terror attacks of October the 7th, and then go on to criticize Israel. And I think that's it's a position I can completely respect.
Yeah.
But I find it much harder to respect a pro-Palestinian guest on my show if they simply resolutely refuse to say that they can condemn the terror attacks.
Yes.
I find that less...
I like that he's just fucking turning around and using Bassem Youssef after glazing him to fucking shit on previous guests that he's had.
One thing that I have noticed, not just on the coverage of these events,
now they can get together and be like,
before, every time this starts, people say, we don't know what's happening. It's a very complicated situation.
Right.
What is happening now? And for me, as a viewer, if a conflict that's been there for 75 years and the media with all this technology has been covering it and we hear the same exact words, we don't know what's happening. It's complicated. It's a very complex. That is a failure of the media apparatus. That is the failure to themselves and for the audience, because why every time this happens, it seems like it is happening from point zero. And I think to help understand that, I will get to the October 7th. I will get to the condemnation. I will get to the self-defense. But I think maybe we can we have like all the time in the world, and we can discuss, this interview could be a bookmark, landmark for maybe looking at that conflict in a deeper way that nobody had gone there before. We have the views, we have people waiting.
Yes.
You know, as I said, I'm the least qualified to discuss that, but it's an opportunity to use it.
I'm not massively well qualified myself.
Yeah, both of us.
I'm
look at us.
I'm an Irish Catholic,
I
right?
mean, look at us. Yeah, two privileged people. One white white wannabe, discussing the most complex conflict of our history. But
Youssef literally just called it moral grandstanding checkboxing. He isn't agreeing with them. Yeah, I mean, he isn't. I think it would be quite difficult for someone like Bassem Youssef to just like sit there and here's the thing. Even if you're an Arab liberal, even if you're an Egyptian liberal, okay, even if no matter what your perspective is, if there's one issue that unites everyone, it is that the bloodshed that Palestinians have withstood is completely and utterly unimaginable. Okay? Like, his wife directly is Palestinian. His wife's family are in Gaza. That gives him a point of personal connection to the atrocities. Okay? So no matter what happens, I don't know why there's like this fucking weird ad break that cut in the middle of this conversation. But that's what it is. It doesn't matter what his like own personal perspective is. It doesn't matter what he said in Egypt, for example. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what his perspective was on the coup that took place or how violent it was. This is this is, no matter what happens on this issue, he's always going to have moral clarity. It's very difficult for him not to. Okay? I agree the glaze up is annoying, but it might just be only some way viewers can humanize Arabs and Palestinians for once. I don't know. I think it just basically it improves his like liberal credentials. That's what happened in that situation. Piers viewers dropped from 50K to 25K. Those first 10 minutes ruined it. It's so strange when Westerners talk about Arabs as if they are a singular culture, ethnicity, and language. Yes, it is by design. It is a way to, it is Islamophobia. If you think all Jews are a monolith, you are an anti-Semite. If you think all Arabs are a monolith, well, then you're just every other person in America, okay? All Arabs and all Muslims, as a matter of fact, are a monolith. Okay? All members, all countries in the MENA region, they're all monolithic. They're all operating under the same interests. They all fucking love one another, and they all are anti-Semitic and hate Israel, and that's it. What the fuck is happening here? What are these goddamn ads? Can we compare the 2011 Egyptian coup to the 2016 Turkish coup attempt, or do you think Erdogan can orchestrate such an event to gain more power? I highly think he agreed with Turkish military supremacists in Turkey after that and changed his politics the other way around. Do you think Egypt would be like Turkey now? I think you can compare the Egyptian coup to the 2016 attempt, but I mean, in the way that I don't know. I don't want to get into this right now. We'll talk about it a little bit more. If you say us atheists are monolithic, I swear to God. Okay, good one. I don't know why there's still this many ads happening here. I can tell you lots of Egyptians have mixed feelings about him. Lots of people are angry with him, but applaud him for using his relative fame standing up to Palestine. We'll see where this goes. Like, as you guys know, I'm not a fan of Erdogan, but I've told you before.
Anti-Semitism.
Yes.
America's involvement in Turkey in the coup that happened, if it had actually succeeded, Turkey would be in a much worse position overall if Fethullah Gülen was able to seize power, an American puppet who's an Islamist himself. And maybe even a worse Islamist than Erdogan, as a matter of fact. If one could even imagine such a thing.
Feel that. And I think it is very important to agree on the language, because the word anti-Semite has been used and abused, and most of the time not for the good interest of the Jewish people. Because the first 2 days of the coverage, I watched the news, and there was a lot of protest that was led by Jewish Voice for Peace. And they were led by people who opposed the Israeli attack on the civilians. And I remember quite well, many of the Republican representatives in Congress came out and they were calling these the global intifada, the global jihad. I love it when they say jihad. They sound like a horse. Jihad. It's very funny. Or they say, like, these are, and I quote, Iranian-backed jihadists. And I said, wait a minute, but most of those people are Jewish. Those people who took over the capital, the same people who took over Central Station in New York, which is known as the biggest civil disobedience event in America in the last 2 decades, they were all Jewish. And then I find Nikki Haley saying anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism. And then I remember, it's like, oh, Jewish people in America are saddened by the fact that they are not citizens of America or citizens of the world, but they are citizens of Israel, and they have to back Israel in whatever they do. And these are not my words. These are the words of Jon Stewart. He went down and he said it's very, very important to divide these two. And what is very, very interesting...
Would you compare that, on that specific point, to the way that people try and say all Palestinians are responsible and accountable for what Hamas do.
Yes, yeah.
In other words, I think you can be very critical of Israeli
What is
government
happening?
and their policies.
Yes.
Is he
and
understanding?
Benjamin Netanyahu and the politicians.
What's going on?
But that doesn't mean that you have to take that criticism to innocent Israelis who may have exactly the same criticism.
Oh my God.
themselves.
And this
Piers
is why
Morgan.
it's very important to have these kinds
He's
of
evolving. He's
because
learning.
The funniest, not the funniest, the saddest thing that I saw is the people that were in so much support of Israel are anti-Semite themselves.
Yes.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, you know, she said like, oh, those are, I send my aides, and they took pictures of the protesters. Basically, she's surveilling protesters. And Marjorie Taylor Greene is very known for a very famous post in 2018 where she blamed the California fires on a Jewish space laser gun. Do you remember that? Do you remember that? I was just like, oh, they were burned because Jewish investors, Rothschild and Feinstein, anything that ends with Stein, because that, of course, sounds Jewish, they put a satellite and shooting laser beams to... It's
possible.
And not just her. You have Steve Skoulas, thank you so much. He is now the Speaker of the House, and he has been invited before for an organization that was funded by David Duke, the founder of the KKK. You have Kevin McCarthy, who is the former minority speaker, leader of the Republican Party in the House, and he accused Jewish billionaires of rigging the midterm. So how come those people are accusing us of anti-Semites? So here's the thing. So let's go to the equation that Nikki Haley put on Twitter. Anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism. No, it is true. People who hate Jews, they're also anti-Zionists. It is true. And you could be someone who hate Zionists, who don't like Zionism, and you are Semite. You could even be Jewish. And guess what? You could be a Zionist, like those people, supporting Israel, and at the same time you hate the Jews, because the chant, Jews will not replace us, these echoed in Charlottesville. It did not echo in Gaza. I mean, in Gaza they say worse stuff in between the bombing, on their downtime. And these are the same people who are seen with Nick Fuentes, with Stephen Bannon. And you know what's most interesting?
Donald Trump had him for dinner at Mar-a-Lago.
And all of those people are buddies with Benjamin Netanyahu. So how does this work? How does this work? And you know the people who speak against this, like Jon Stewart, like Bernie Sanders, like Naomi Klein, what do they call these people? What do they call them?
Self-hating Jews.
Hating Jews. And you know what else now they call them? They call them capos. Capos. You know what's capos? Capos, basically these were the Jewish inmate in Auschwitz that were forced by the Nazis to stand as guards on their own inmates. You see how degrading this is. And this is the way to shut down conversation. Anti-Semite, Islamophobe, you hate America, you hate the military, you hate Egypt, war on Christmas. This is how you shut an environment that does not allow disagreement is not an environment made for growth. It's an environment made for control.
Let me ask you this. Say, take the student protests in America, at universities.
I think he would do he's doing a much better job than I would because he's liberal.
It's actually part of the DNA of being a student, right? But I do have a problem.
I think for as broad an audience as possible, liberalism, like tackling this issue from a liberal perspective is much better.
Which were clearly, deeply, deliberately inflammatory and hurtful to Jewish people. Secondly, I have a real problem with the students who were beaming direct pro-Hamas slogans onto buildings on campuses in America. You know, I'm all for free speech, and I really am. The whole show is predicated on that. But not to the point where you see Jewish students barricaded into libraries because a mob is descending on them. There is a distinction to me between people who are obviously overtly, I mean, there was a professor at Cornell University who was literally seen in public shouting how exhilarated he felt by the attacks of October the 7th. He still hasn't been fired, that guy. I think that crosses a line. Do you?
Yeah. I do not like this way. I mean, I can understand why, but I don't condone it. I would never, because you have to understand these people, again, I'm not supporting them. I just want to make sure about two things. The reason that I started with anti-Semitism, because I wanted to make sure to clear any confusion that when I speak about Israel, I'm speaking about Israel.
Yes.
When I speak about Jewish people, I'm speaking about Jewish people.
Yes.
When I speak about my Zionists, I'm speaking about Zionists. It was very... Because
I think it was very powerful that you did that.
Yeah, I have to be careful.
That's the first thing you did, because I think it's really important.
Yeah, but at the same time, when I tell you why does that happen, it doesn't mean that I condone it. There's a difference between explanation and justification. Those people who are exhilarated, the way that they see, this is the same reason why people were so happy about the interview. What do they see? They see Israel as a criminal state who is killing their people, and in the same time, they are supported by the international community and the American. They have no guns, they have no superpower backing them. All they have is just feeling of happiness, like, yes, our enemies that we cannot touch them has been hurt. All they can think about, that these are their enemies that have been hurt, right? I'm not condoning this, but again, like when people were celebrating terrorist attacks, you know, against Western targets. Of course, I don't condone that. But why? Because those people has been, from a very young age, what have they seen? They're not being heard by the media. The plight and the suffering of the brothers in Israel, in Palestine, in the Arab world are not being heard. People in Iraq, you know, like when America and Britain invaded Iraq, right? What the Arabs saw? It's like two superpowers are coming in on just regular people. So whenever there was like a bomb or like an attack on American troops, people would
starving
celebrate.
refugee tents, and started digging Hamas tunnels through cement with bare hands.
Very inflammatory, and it is not
Good one,
right.
dude. You got it.
Those people had nothing else. All they can say is just like shout. All they say is like to rejoice. It is not right. Again, I'm explaining why is this happening, because it's like, yeah, if I cannot get you, I'm just gonna scratch your eyes. I'm gonna scratch your eyes because you've been beating me all the time, and you have the whole international community backing you up, and all I can do is scream. Is it right? No. But it is understandable. Again, it's not the right thing. But no, it's not like understandable. It's like, oh, no. But again, it is an explanation.
This is hard for people to understand. They don't get it. They don't get it. They will never get it. You run ads like a capitalist? Yes, I do. I am, dude. I am. I love capitalism. Yum, yum, yum. Yummy, yummy, yummy. What changed? Question I always ask people is, what changed? Okay, let's say I'm a capitalist and I advocate for the exact same things that I'm advocating for. Okay. Do you have an argument to the things that I'm advocating for? Or now do you still just say, well, you're fucking bad at capitalism? Like, what are you going to say? This is why, like, hypocrisy baiting is so stupid. When you try to, like, it's very effective as a rhetorical tool, but it's very stupid. Okay? I can defend a position that I don't believe in as well, if you would like. And you would not be able to make this like, oh, well, you're hypocritical argument in that situation, right? It's also not exactly hypocritical anyway, but it doesn't matter. You know, is this chatter now anti-capitalist because you got money? Yeah. You don't got no capital. Here you are defending capitalism. You ain't got no capital, motherfucker. So why are you defending capitalism then? You know what I mean? You got no capital and you got no bitches. Here you are, bitchless and devoid of any capital whatsoever. Anyway. Yeah, motherfuckers think they buy like some Tesla stock and think, oh shit. That's it. That's it, boys. Passive income time. Thinking that they fucking have any say whatsoever. Not the classiest point, but yeah, true, lol. That's my point. It's like, even if I myself am I don't know, even if you think I'm like a capitalist, sure, whatever, who cares? Yeah, I'm a capitalist. Just like most people in the Western world. Okay, what changed? What changed in my analysis? You know what I mean? Nothing. So address the actual points rather than just like looking for hypocrisy. Especially because, like, let's say I'm a capitalist and I'm actually engaging in anti-capitalist sentiment, okay? Let's say I'm a capitalist and engaging in anti-capitalist sentiment. I'm a class traitor, okay?
Damn, this guy's good.